Hello and welcome to episode 38 of the GreenWave podcast by Synergy International. I'm SYNI, your host, and today's topic is of a slightly specialist nature within the world of sustainable politics, nationally determined contributions, otherwise known as NDCs, and whether they are a credible foundation of climate action or a theatrical flourish of sustainable politics that promises the Earth on the grand political stage, but then forgets its lines once the global attention and auditorium empties. We're not offering some simple yes or no answer to such a nuanced question. Stick with us for the next 22 minutes. As always, our goal is to stimulate critical thought and debate. The words nationally determined contribution sound like something a civil servant might whisper to a spreadsheet at midnight. So we're just going with NDCs for the rest of the pod. In practice, a NDC is a country's public climate plan. Most countries submitted initial emission targets prior to adopting the Paris Agreement in 2015. The second round of NDCs, which set targets through 2030, happened in 2020 to 2021. Now, countries are in the process of submitting new NDCs with targets that will extend through 2035. Each round of commitments should be strengthened based on the latest climate science and countries' own capabilities and resources. But a NDC is more than a statement of intent for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and for adapting to climate impacts. It is also a test of seriousness. NDC plans reveal how a government thinks. Ambition without a pathway is a slogan. A pathway without funding is a wish. A wish without monitoring is a press release with delusions of grandeur. The question we explore today is whether these plans still help to build credibility or whether they have slipped into ritual where applause matters more than outcomes. Countries submit climate plans in cycles and aim to raise ambition each time. This constant return to the drafting table binds politics to the calendar and keeps climate decisions in view even when other crises crowd the headlines. The design is intentionally universal. Every party brings something to the table, and the whole is meant to add up to a safer temperature pathway. Universality is a strength because it normalizes participation and reduces the temptation to sit out the dance. It is also a constraint because the system must remain viable for different national realities. Listeners who negotiate these texts for a living already know the architecture. The next round of plans is due this cycle, and the expectation is clear. Plans should move forward, cover more of the economy, and include better accounting. The transparency framework asks countries to report on progress in a standard way so that numbers can be compared with fewer arguments about definitions. That alone is a quiet revolution. 5 minutes with 2 emissions inventories from a decade ago could end friendships. Today, there is more order and fewer excuses for creative arithmetic. The Dubai COP28 conference in late 2023 did something politically important that now spills into this planning round. It put an unmistakable signpost in the middle of the energy conversation. It asked for a rapid rise in clean power and faster improvements in energy efficiency and named the direction of travel away from fossil fuels. Lawyers will continue to debate verbs. Investors read the direction and move capital. The consequence is that each new national plan is judged not only by its headline number, but by its alignment with these energy signals. If a plan announces a bold target, while the grid connection queue is a mile long and the permitting office runs on paper, listeners in finance will notice the mismatch. Finance brings us to credibility's favourite topic. A plan is strongest when it includes a budget, a sequencing of measures, and a view of who pays for what. The global system has stepped up with a new collective goal that aims to increase support and mobilise larger flows. That shift matters because developing countries cannot transform energy systems, food systems, transport, and industry on aspiration alone. The credibility question therefore travels in both directions. emerging economies ask whether support will arrive and whether it will be accessible. Providers ask whether plans are specific enough to invest against, and whether results will be measured in a way that allows them to defend those investments to taxpayers and boards. Credibility emerges when both sides can answer yes with evidence. Now, to the heart of the debate. There is a case that NDCs still anchor seriousness. The first argument is political gravity. These plans force cabinet discussion. They drive coordination across ministries that rarely agree on anything before lunch. They prompt sectoral strategies, and they elevate climate policy from a side project to a national project. The second argument is market signal. When a government publishes an economy-wide pathway, private actors receive the message that business models must shift. Lenders, insurers, energy buyers, and supply chains begin to adapt. The third argument is accountability. Even when enforcement is soft at the international level, domestic law and public scrutiny can give teeth. Courts can examine whether a government's emissions plan is credible, and they have shown a willingness to do so. Independent advisory bodies in several jurisdictions can quantify gaps and issue uncomfortable advice in daylight. Civil society runs watchdog services that compare policy claims with measured outcomes. These are not perfect tools, and yet they add ballast to promises. A second layer supports this anchor case. Measurement is getting better. Countries are beginning to submit transparency reports that use common tables and clearer methods. Inventories are more complete. Data platforms make it easier to compare mitigation actions across sectors. Power system planners can now model the hourly effects of renewable build-out and storage and demand response. Industrial decarbonisation plans can be stress-tested for technology readiness and cost. Agriculture and land use accounting remains challenging, and even so, there is a distinct shift from aspiration to quantification. As the numbers improve, debate shifts from whether something is happening to how quickly it is happening, and what policy tweak will deliver more progress per dollar spent. That is a healthier argument. There is also progress in the social contract of climate policy. The best plans now foreground just transition, community benefits, and workforce development. They identify which households and which regions will feel pressure from changing technologies, and they budget for fairness. This is not virtue signalling. It is risk management. A climate plan that fails to protect people who bear the brunt of change will not survive its first encounter with elections. Credibility emerges when the plan is rooted in the politics of the place, and when those politics allow it to endure beyond a single term. There is a counter case that our climate plans have indeed become a ritual. The opening ceremony at all of the big conferences are impressive. The language is stirring. The outcome in the following years is flatter than the applause. Emissions remain high. The gap to safer temperature pathways persists. Policy reversals arrive with changes in government or with energy price shocks. National targets shift to the right, while timelines for infrastructure and permitting remain stuck. Public finance pledges are made with fanfare and then drift into complex accounting. Private capital promises to mobilise at scale and then discovers that projects do not reach bankability because regulatory risk is unresolved and local capacity is thin. The distance between headline ambition and implementation creates a credibility penalty. That penalty grows each time a plan launches without an early tranche of real actions to prove that delivery is already underway. A second weakness sits in the fine print of many plans. Too many rely on generic future technologies that are not yet at commercial scale in the relevant context, or rely on international carbon transfers that remain difficult to operationalise. Offsets and credits can play a role in a narrow set of cases with high integrity and strong guardrails. When they become a substitute for hard domestic measures in power, transport, buildings, and industry, listeners will hear the creak of a shortcut. The accounting may balance on paper, the emissions do not leave the atmosphere. A third weakness is sector coverage. Some plans still omit parts of the economy or treat large emitting sectors as footnotes. A credible plan for this decade needs clear pathways for power systems, for vehicles and charging, for heat in buildings, for industrial heat and process emissions, for methane in energy and agriculture, and for land use. It also needs an honest treatment of the grid. Targets for clean capacity without a construction plan for transmission and distribution are a promise stranded at the substation. The fourth weakness is timing. Long-term targets are easy to announce and hard to contest in the moment. Near-term targets decide whether the long-term is plausible. The private sector discounts the future. So does nature. When a plan has strong numbers in 2040 and vague steps for 2027, credibility slips. Early actions do more than cut emissions. They build capability inside institutions, reveal bottlenecks, and expand the coalition for deeper change. So, where does that leave us on the central question? Are these plans still a critical part of establishing credibility, or have they drifted into the kind of political ritual that delights headlines and disappoints physics? The responsible answer is that the instrument remains essential, and the use of the instrument determines its value. It is the same with any tool. A scalpel can heal or harm. A plan can catalyze delivery or distract from it. Our job is to insist on design features that tilt the balance toward delivery. A credible NDC in this cycle will pass a few practical tests. The first is alignment. The plan should be consistent with the energy direction that is now shared. Clean power expands quickly. Energy efficiency improves at a steady clip. Fossil fuel use declines through the 2020s with fairness in mind. The second is coverage. The plan should be economy-wide and include all major greenhouse gases with clear baselines and methods. Partial coverage sends a signal that serious choices can wait. The third is policy detail. Targets need policies that move prices, unlock investment, and shift technology. That includes carbon pricing or its policy cousins, standards that drive performance, fiscal measures that reward clean choices, and market reforms that pull private capital toward useful projects. The fourth is money. The plan needs a multi-year public budget and a pipeline of bankable projects that can attract private finance. The fifth is law and institutions. Embed the plan in domestic law where possible. Set enforceable milestones. Empower an independent body to track delivery and publish progress. Require a government response when that body identifies a gap. The sixth is transparency. Publish the assumptions, the models, and the data. Invite scrutiny. The seventh is fairness. Include measures for workers and communities and small firms. Show how benefits and costs are shared and how support will protect those who are most exposed. The eighth is resilience. Make clear how the plan adapts to climate impacts and how infrastructure and finance will hold under stress. There is also a diplomatic layer to credibility. Plans that are fair in effort across countries are easier to sell at home and easier to sustain abroad. The richest countries can move faster in absolute terms and can support others with finance and technology and capacity. Emerging economies can set clear signals for clean investment and use public support to crowd in private capital for transmission, storage, and resilience. Small island and least developed countries can include sharp priorities that attract partners and push for access reforms that reduce the transaction costs of climate funds. Each of these moves increases the probability that numbers on a page become actions on the ground. Let us talk about offsets and carbon markets in clear terms. Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which enables international cooperation to tackle climate change, is not a magic door to an emissions-free future. It is a framework that can enable cooperation when both sides plan carefully, use conservative baselines, apply conservative accounting, and retire credits without games. A credible national plan treats international transfers as a supplement. It focuses first on domestic transformation and uses credits for a narrow set of cases where abatement is truly harder or where cooperation delivers more mitigation for everyone. That approach makes the plan sturdier in the face of uncertainty about market rules and registries. Some listeners will ask for a one-line verdict. That would be neat and misleading. Evidence points to both momentum and inertia. Clean technologies scale faster than expected and reach new price points. Data and transparency improve. Finance is mobilizing in places and in sectors that once looked out of reach. Emissions remain high, and policies in several large economies are moving in inconsistent directions. The tool is sound. The usage is mixed. The opportunity is the same as it has been since Paris. Align short-term action with long-term necessity and make politics and finance work for physics rather than against it. A practical way to close is with a reader's checklist you can hold up to any plan without needing to be inside the room. Start with the base year and the end year. Is the target explained in absolute terms with a clear scope? Move to sector pathways. Does power have a year when coal use ends? Does transport have sales targets and charging build-out milestones? Do buildings have clear plans for heat? Does industry have measures for process emissions and for heat below and above 200 degrees? Look for methane. Look for land use integrity. Scan for the grid plan and for permitting reform. Turn to finance. Is there a multi-year budget and a pipeline of projects? Are domestic measures aligned with international support and with multilateral finance? Ask about institutions. Is there an independent body and a legal duty to respond to its advice? Is there a mechanism to correct course when delivery slips? Check transparency. Are the models and assumptions public? Finally, check fairness. Are there measures for workers and for communities, for health and for access to affordable energy? A plan that clears these hurdles earns the benefit of the doubt. A plan that misses across these dimensions invites skepticism. Sustainable politics will always have theatre. Leaders must persuade. Conferences are calibration points for a fragmented world. The risk is not the presence of theatre. The risk is theatre without delivery. NDCs remain the script. The audience is increasingly expert. Investors, engineers, mayors, and households can tell whether the lines are backed by a production budget and a crew that knows its cues. Give them a plan with real money, real policy, real milestones, and real data, and they will join the cast. Give them a flourish with no follow-through, and they will quietly plan around you. The final thought lands on the word contribution. That word makes the logic of Paris honest. No single plan rescues the climate. Each plan contributes. Credibility is the bridge between a national plan and a global outcome. It is built from law, budget, institutions, data, and fairness. It is proven by delivery this year and next year, not by a distant promise. If the next round of plans leans into that truth, the system remains the right tool for the job. If we slide into ritual without results, the instrument will lose authority and the audience will turn away. The choice is in the hands of the people who file the plans and in the hands of those who read them with a clear eye. Well, that's a wrap on episode 38 of our GreenWave podcast episode. We appreciate you sharing your time. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, Podchaser, Boomplay, and Player FM, so feel free to follow the pod and share with friends. We'd love if you would leave a review. If you have missed any of our LinkedIn posts or the GreenWave Gazette, you can always catch us on LinkedIn, X, Facebook, Instagram, or visit synergy-international.net. We'll keep reflecting on the trends shaping sustainable finance and global policy. Until next time, keep riding the green wave of sustainability.